set, and I've provided you a small script to load the data into your database, and we're going to work through that right now. So first things first, we want to make sure that the database is running. So if you go to your system preferences, click on that Apple sign on the top left and system preferences, and if you're using Windows, the steps are going to be slightly different, but just locate your MySQL database, which for me is right here in the Mac. Notice this icon right here. So if I click it, I want to make sure that this is running. Okay, so since this is running, I can start the IDE that I downloaded to connect to the database, and that IDE, if you recall, that was called MySQL Workbench, and that's in my applications. So if I go to my applications, let's look for the MySQL Workbench. I'm just going to type in M to quickly locate it, and here it is, MySQL Workbench. So let's double click it and get this started. Click on Open, and I'll just close this applications folder. We don't need that. And this is the default connection that I named in the previous lecture. So you should have this configured if you were following along. And this is the root username. And remember, when we were installing the MySQL database on this machine, it provided us a temporary password. And then when we logged into this connection the first time, we had to change that temporary password, and I changed it to password 123. So that's the same password we're going to use to connect to this root connection. So let's just double click there, and then it's asking us for that password, which I had changed to password 123. Okay, and just hit OK. So there we go. This is our MySQL Workbench IDE to connect to the database. We can type in SQL commands. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of SQL. This is not a SQL course, so I don't want to go off track here. I want to keep the focus on Java. If you want to learn SQL, you can take my other course, which is titled the Complete Oracle SQL Certification Course. That's also available on Udemy, as well as on my website, jobreadyprogrammer.com. So let me expand this window here and start typing the script that I provided in the resources for this lecture. I have it off screen here. I'm going to paste it, and this is a script that will help us create that database and load some sample data. So I'm going to walk you through each one of these lines of code here. This is all SQL. So the first line is to create the database, and I called it employees database. So we have to execute this line by line. So I'm going to highlight this line and then click on this Thunderbolt button. Click that, and notice on the bottom it's saying create database, employees database. So one row affected. So that means that we've created the database. The next thing, we need to switch to using that database. So there's this command called use. So I'm going to highlight this line and then hit that same Thunderbolt button. Click on that, and that's going to execute that command. So now notice it's saying use employees database. So now we've switched over to using this employees database. And let me actually increase the size of this font. I don't know if you could see it in this video, but I'm going to increase it to 130%. You can click on this up and down arrow and change it to 130 or 140, whatever is viewable for you. So hopefully that's a bit clearer. You could see the script. We already executed this line. I highlighted it, clicked on the Thunderbolt. Then I executed this line. I highlighted it, clicked on the Thunderbolt. So I'm going to highlight this and click on Thunderbolt, and notice that we've got a couple of databases here. We've got the information schema. This comes built in to MySQL. This is the database that we created, employees database. The MySQL database, this comes with the schema, performance schema, sys. These all come with the database except for this employees database that I just created. Okay, so just to make sure that we are in fact using, since I've already executed this use employees database line, I want to make sure that we are using this database. So how do we check that? There's a command, and I'm just going to type that up here. You type in select database, and it's sort of like a method. So we have the open close parentheses there. So highlight this line. Notice that we're highlighting line by line. So highlight that and hit this execution button. And notice that it's saying that we are using, right? We're using this employees database. okay? So inside of this employees database, I need to create a table. And this table is nothing but, think of it as sort of like an Excel spreadsheet. That's literally how I want you to think about the data that goes in a database table. It's like an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm just going to highlight this line, the reason why I call it one line is because notice the semicolon is at the end, okay? So when you see a semicolon, that's the end of the particular statement. This is a create table statement. This will create a table called employees underscore TBL, and it's going to create it in our employees database, and it has a couple of columns. It has the ID column, the name, the department, the salary. So basically it's just employee information. And don't worry too much about this. This is just basically giving a unique identifier to every single row, and we gave that column the title ID. Okay, so to run this statement, I can't just run it line by line here. I need to highlight everything because this together makes up one entire statement because of the semicolon at the end. Okay, so this entire thing is one statement. I'm going to highlight that, hit the execute button, and notice it's saying on the bottom here, you could see the notes. It's saying create table employees TBL. Okay, so it created that table. So just to make sure that that table made its way into the database, if I go to show tables, if I type this line, highlight it, and then run the execute button, notice it's showing that this is the table in the employees database. See, it says tables in employees database, and this is the table that we just created. So let me press this X button that will stop showing us the results. So we've got this table in this database. All right, now to load this table with data, I need to execute these insert statements, okay? And we have a handful of these. So the first line here is going to insert into this table that we just created with these values. So this 100 is going to go into the ID column. The name Michael is going to go into the name column. The department sales is going to go into the department column. And this number 5,500, the salary, is going to go into the salaries column. So notice it's sequentially ordered. So we're going to execute this one by one. So let's highlight this first line, hit the execute button, and there we go. It says insert into employees table values, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it inserted those. The next line, I'm going to highlight this and execute this line. So let's just hit the execute button. And there we go. That line was also inserted. Now, you might be wondering, what if we have hundreds of lines? This is tedious if I have to highlight one line at a time. So there is a shortcut. You can actually highlight all of these lines. Right now we have, I've already executed the first two. These right here I have not executed yet. And notice that, this is, each one of these is a separate statement. The insert statement, insert statement, insert statement, and it ends with a semicolon. So I can highlight multiple statements in one shot. Now, before I execute this, I just noticed that I've got a problem in this statement. Notice that the IDs here, 100, 200, 300, these are uniquely going to identify each row, right? These are unique identifiers for every single employee in our database. So this last line here, Romeo that works in the legal department, his salary is 5,400. His ID is the same as Peter, who works in HR. So I need to change this. I'm just going to increment that to 700, okay? I'm glad I caught that before executing that statement. So let me highlight this again. You won't see that error in your script, by the way. So anyway, I'm going to highlight this again, and to run all of these statements at once in one execution, you can click on that same execution button, which is right here. Notice when I put my mouse on this Thunderbolt button, it's saying execute the selected portion of the script. Right, that's what it says. So we have to select the portion of the script that we want first and then run this button. So I'm just going to highlight all of these and then hit that button, and boom, there you go. All of those records, we've got John, Samuel, Beth, Peter, Romeo, all of these guys made it into the employees table. So hopefully you were following along and you were able to execute this script, and I gave some extra details, and hopefully you were testing some of this stuff out. If you made a mistake, you can drop this database or delete this table, and you can look those statements up. They're not hard, but if you want to drop this database, you could do drop database and then type in employees underscore database. All right, and that's just going to get rid of all of the data, or it's going to get rid of this employees table. It's going to get rid of the data that we inserted, everything. And then you can start again if you choose to. So I'm not gonna run this because we executed all of this fine, but it's just a way for you to revert back if you ever run into an issue with executing some of these statements. Okay, you can drop the database, or you could drop this table and create it again. So these were statements to create the database, create the table, and insert data into the table. Let me show you how to view that data. All right, and this is where JDBC is going to be helpful. When we get to it, you're going to be able to query the database using SQL, and that data could come from the database into your application. You can also update the data. You can insert data as well as delete data and run procedures and functions within your Java application. So there's no limitation to what you can do in terms of interacting with the database. But that's stuff for more database experienced developers. You don't have to be a pro at databases to use JDBC, as long as you understand these basics. So let me get rid of that entire script, and now let me query the table that we created. So to query, we just use this select statement. You type in select, and then you type in star, and then you can do from the particular table, and the table is called employees underscore TBL. And notice the syntax here. The select and from does not have to be capital. I just like to see it in capital, but you can have this in lowercase as well if you'd like, the select and the from. So we got select star from employees table. So let's just highlight this and run that Thunderbolt button, and notice that this is our data in the table. So we've got Michael, Cassandra, Samuel, John. It has their departments, it has the salaries, as well as their employee ID or whatever. Okay. Now this on the bottom here, this is just sort of a logging to the screen what we are doing, similar to logging to the console in a Java application. This is basically logging all of our activity that we are performing with this database. So it's not necessary to see this. I'm just going to click on this button on the top right with a blue bar on the bottom. Click that middle button, and there you go. That logging disappears. And I'm just going to sort of move this grid a little bit to the bottom so it's more reader friendly. So this is our data, and this is how you can query the table. So instead of the star, which is going to give us all of the columns, this is considered a wildcard, and it just says give me everything. So instead of all of the columns, I just want to see two columns. For example, I want to see the name column and the department DEPT column from the employees table, and this is how I would do that. So select name department from employees table. So let's just highlight this and hit the Thunderbolt button, and boom, notice that we only see the name column and the department column. If I want to see the salary, I could add that to the column list as well. So now highlight this, hit run, and whoops, the sal column does not exist. I believe it was called salary. So let me spell that properly. We want to make sure we get the column names correct. So now let's highlight this and hit the execute, and now we get the salary column as well. Okay, and this logging thing popped up again. I'm just gonna press this blue button in the middle so that we can get rid of that logging and see the actual data. Now if I want to get those employees that have a salary greater than 6,000, the statement for that would be select, and just to show you that it doesn't have to be capital select, I could have a lowercase select. Select star, give me all the columns. Select star from employee underscore TBL, where, right, this is a new keyword that we're seeing in the SQL language, where the salary is greater than 5,000. Okay, so highlight this statement and hit the execute, and there we go. Now we only see employees that make more than $5,000. You can even do an equal sign here to get those employees that have the salary 5,000. So let's highlight this and hit the execute, and notice there's only one employee that's making 5,000. His name is Peter. He works in the HR department. And notice that because of the star, all of the columns are showing. All right. If I want to just see the name and the department, I could just do name, comma, department, DEPT, and that will just give me the name column and the department column. So let me highlight this and hit the execute, and notice now we only see Peter and HR. So if you want to learn more about SQL, you can visit the site called Tech on the Net. And this is a great site. I'm going to have it here on the screen for a second. Visit this website if you want to learn more about SQL, and you just have to go to the MySQL database section, and you can learn all about these commands. There's commands for updating the data, there's commands for deleting the data, and writing all kinds of queries. So this right here is considered a query. That's what people refer to it as, because it's essentially a question we are asking the database. We're saying which employees have salary that's equal to 1,000, and we give this command, we send that command to the database, and the database gives us back this result. This result is referred to as a result set, and this terminology is going to be more relevant when we get into the Java JDBC API. So this IDE, we're sending these commands through this IDE, and these commands are sent to the database, and the database returns that data as a result set, and that result set is displayed in this grid. So similar to this IDE, we can have a Java application that sends these kinds of queries to the database, and the database would have to respond with a similar kind of result set, and we could do whatever we want with that result set. And that's what JDBC allows us to do. It's a Java database connectivity API. You can use the Java language to communicate with the database, but you still need to know some SQL. All right, the basic SQL commands that I went over are enough for the remainder of this course, but if you want to explore more, you can check out the Tech on the Net website. But anyway, I'm going to wrap up this lecture. Hopefully you got your environment set up, you've got the data. In the next lecture, we're going to get into the JDBC API to have Java talk to the database. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next lecture.